So Poseidon, he's like, "Go, my son, avenge me, kill the tree."
He bumbles around
Then
and kills himself.
Hello, and welcome to Notes from the Oracle. I'm Connor, and together with Jack, my co-host from Cabin 6, we're going beyond Half-Blood Hill to take a closer look at the electrifying mythology of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, Book 1, The Lightning Thief. Chapter 10, I Ruin a Perfectly Good Bus. We have made it to the double digits. Are you proud of us?
We did it. I'm incredibly proud, Connor. This is the most book I've read for fun in a very long time.
I know, right? It's been a great time.
Mm-hmm. I will say, this chapter, not bad, but it was just all right. We've had a lot of bangers recently, a lot of really, really, really good chapters, and this one felt okay. There was some really good stuff in it, but it definitely wasn't as, we'll say, I don't know, exciting. I can't think of the word for it.
Impactful.
Impactful.
It was less impactful.
That's a great word. Yes.
Very much is another one of those chapters that feels like, to me, to play with the metaphor of they actually do get on a bus in the chapter, where Rick is, again, like, all right, let's all get on the bus, and now we have to go from one destination to the other. Nothing really important is going to happen on our way there, but we have to get there somehow. So everybody on the bus.
Yep.
And that is largely what this chapter is. You can sum up this chapter in 3 to 4 sentences. They pack
and
their
we're not
things,
going to.
and then they leave.
Yeah. Well, I guess that is the
is
podcast. If you want to end it there, we definitely could.
We could.
Yeah.
Jump straight to the myths.
But Connor, you and I, we are incredibly verbose and love to hear ourselves talk. So let's hear ourselves talk about this chapter that got us from point A to point B.
Well, I've got something to start us with. Percy has his packing list. He's got all the important things, an extra change of clothes, a toothbrush, and the camp store, which loaned him $100. And I only bring up the exact amount because that is $160 in 2025 money. So 20 years later, that is a 1.6 times multiplier on that $100.
See, I had a note there that said how much in today's money, and then right underneath I just put Connor because I knew that you would do it.
Accurate. Entirely accurate. They are also sent with something that no demigod should be caught without: nectar and ambrosia squares, which, as we've previously discussed, is basically their healing potions. So those are definitely good to have.
I do love how it's described like they're going on a field trip. It's a canteen of nectar and specifically a Ziploc baggie of ambrosia squares. I just love that in one of our prior myths, you talked all about how people have lost their lives trying to get these foods and drinks of the gods. These were these mythical aspects of divinity, what the gods ate and drank. And it's like, yeah, it's in a rusty canteen and a little baggie that will probably get a hole in it at some point. It's just such a fun juxtaposition.
This stuff is worth so much money in the grand scheme of things to mortals, probably. And they're just like,
it's priceless.
Whatever. Yeah. However, the other demigods are, of course, also getting their, or not other demigods, the other demigod, which is Annabeth, is getting her things ready. She's got her 12th birthday present, which means that she actually got the hat rather recently. I hadn't realized just how recently she had gotten that.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that too. I was under the impression, and I don't know why, that she had this hat at the very least when she was running around with Luke originally. I thought it was maybe a gift that Athena gave her to like help keep her safe when they were doing their cross-country excursion. But I guess not. I guess she just got enough brownie points racked up that Athena was like, hey, happy 12th, here you go.
Yeah, that's exactly what I had thought. But she turned 12 about a year ago, I would assume at this point. I know Percy is 12 at this point, so can't have been that long ago, as I'm pretty sure Annabeth is just slightly older than Percy. But she brings that. She also brings the long bronze knife, which really cool that she just hides it in her shirt sleeve. This is, of course, the knife that she gets from Luke while they are on the run, so this is an item that she's had for 5 years. And Grover just brings his bright orange backpack full of scrap metal and apples to snack on, as well as in his pocket a set of reed pipes that, quote, his daddy goat had carved for him.
Connor, how could you miss the most important and interesting thing that Annabeth brought? The
Oh,
book
her
on
wonderful
famous
book.
classical architecture written in ancient Greek. You know, to read when she gets bored. Because nothing stimulates the mind like, I guess, architecture. Not even looking at it, just reading about it. I love theory.
What do you think? Better to entertain you? A book on architecture or Grover playing Hilary Duff's So Yesterday on his reed pipes?
Personally, I'm here for Grover's read pipes. This chapter, I will
Yeah.
say, and we'll get into it more. I've already been kind of like enjoying Grover more and more with each passing chapter. He annoyed me at first, and I ragged on him a lot. This chapter made me so Team Grover. It's insane.
It's a good
The
Grover chapter.
balls on this goat, absolutely wild. Again, we'll talk about it. There's multiple points throughout the chapter. But I would be hyping him up if he whipped out his reed pipes and started blowing some Hillary Duff. You kidding me? I don't care how bad it is. I've got to let my boy know that he's appreciated.
Absolutely. And then, after all of them are ready, of course, Luke shows up at the literal last second, almost fails his entire quest by not giving Percy the cursed item that is literally the most important thing he needs to do. We've talked about how he's been training Percy and getting him ready so that he'll make it to the underworld, so that these shoes will take him to Tartarus. He has to show up at the last second. He's huffing and puffing. He's sprinting the way there. Luke, think.
We've already been over. There's precedent for this. He sucks at quests. He's not good at them.
And that's so true.
Even this really menial one, apparently he's just averse to doing it well. He gets it done, granted.
That's true. But dude really almost failed step one of the master plan of evil.
Yeah, that would have been tough. It's a good thing he managed to recoup and get there in time. Connor, I'm also, you and I were usually on the same wavelength, but I'm getting, you're 0 for 2 now because you missed the book on architecture and you also totally skipped over the most important character is back. He arrives before Luke.
Argus!
Argus is there, my man. And you said he wouldn't show up again until the very end.
I lied. I'll eat my words. I'm so sorry. I never meant to lie to any of you, but I did.
I
And I
don't know
own
that I
that.
can trust you, Connor.
That's valid. You can trust me in knowing that I will mention him, and I do mean this, incredibly briefly in today's myth section.
Perfect. I look forward to it. But
It
yes,
is in a really sad way, too. Anyhow, continue.
Argus is there. Everything is right with the world because our thousand-eyed man is chilling, waiting to take Percy, Annabeth, and Grover out to the city. Luke shows up, nick of time, gives him the cursed shoes, and Percy mentions that he was being cool enough to come say goodbye and give him this gift or what he believes is a gift. And I do like how Percy mentions I'd been a bit afraid that he might resent me for getting so much attention the last few days.
Yeah. Doesn't that hit hard? Because he's so right. He
He
just doesn't
is.
know it.
I have said many, many times that Percy is a dumbass and an idiot, and many variations of those ideas. But at the very least, in the last few chapters, his instincts, his intuition, really unparalleled. He
Oh,
is calling
absolutely.
things as he sees them and is being super accurate. All the stuff that's wrong with the gods, all the stuff that's crazy with the monsters, all the weird nonsense that's happening at Camp Half Blood, the stuff with the prophecy, his weird, I will say spider sense because I keep comparing this guy to Peter Parker, his spidey sense that he has with Luke. Granted, his guard is being dropped here. He is viewing this as more of an olive branch, but I do love that that thought was there and the idea of, yeah, Percy has an innate sense of how people act or will act.
Oh, yeah. And to your point, even after he gets this olive branch of a gift, he's getting the right vibes from Luke. He does immediately look at Chiron after Luke leaves
Yes.
And he goes, I won't be able to use these, will I? Again, maybe it's some sort of spidey sense. Maybe he's getting that prickle on the back of his neck, but he's immediately thinking the right thought, which is, I don't want to wear these.
Hmm.
And we'll go back a moment, right? Because he immediately turns to Annabeth after Luke leaves and he says, you let him capture the flag instead of you, didn't you? And he's right again. And in fact, I think that this moment is a deeper look into Annabeth's character without having to spend a lot of time on it. Because if you think about where Luke has been, his quest was the last major quest that anyone from Camp Half-Blood went on. And he has been miserable ever since, right? That is, for all intents and purposes, probably the instigation point for Luke's downfall into villainy. So, from Annabeth's perspective, she really probably wanted to see the heroic, positive Luke that she knew from those months that they spent on the road, hiding from monsters, fighting through, and being on the run with Dahlia, acting valiantly like heroes and friends. And so, she probably gives him, at least to me, this little moment of glory to bring that back. And maybe in the hopes that we've talked about Annabeth's hope and how she's actually a very hopeful character. And maybe this was her hope that she could reignite that within him, give him that spark to become less jaded.
Mm, that's a really good read. I like that. I didn't think about it that way, but I do really like that. I'm going to assimilate that into my head canon.
But with that, of course, Chiron is lamenting that he should have trained Percy better, which I'm sure you also caught this,
Oh
Jack.
my God, Connor. Oh my God. My fucking blood pressure skyrocketed when I read this line. I'm gonna let you take the lead because I don't want to scream at or near you for upwards of 10 minutes talking about how much I fucking hated this one line.
I also thought that this one line was absolutely ridiculous, purely on the basis that, as we have discussed, if only I had more time. Hercules, Jason, they all got more training. Yeah, probably because you didn't say, ooh, we shouldn't tell him that he's a demigod. Let's gaslight him instead. The short version is, yep, you could have had months more, Chiron. You could have had months more time. And you just didn't take them, and that is on you.
It's entirely on him. It
You
I
should
am
have trained him better.
choking back screams right now. Just bellows of frustration, Connor. It's everything that we've been talking about thrown literally right back in our face, and it drives me up a wall. I
Was
hate to say
oopsie.
it. I really do, Connor. I think I hate Chiron.
I can see it. Like, I
I
can see why.
remember at the very least enjoying Chiron as a kid. I thought he was a very, Ben Kenobi classic mentor figure, and I thought he was cool and wise. But all he does through this read through is piss me off.
He doesn't do a lot. I think that's part of the problem. It's like, yeah, sure, he does the archery training, but most of the other important parts of Percy's training and acclimation to this new world. Because let's take a step back and think about the hero's journey. Chiron is your old wise mentor. This is a staple part of the trope of the hero's journey. And so you would expect him to do a little bit more mentoring or a little bit more being wise. So far, it looks like he's just old.
He's just old. He's just old. That's all he
Like,
is. I would say he is borderline detrimental, if not outright detrimental. He is weirdly esoteric and speaks in riddles with Percy. He overcomplicates everything, including the narrative that Percy now lives in. He actively wasted months. And I'm going to stop. I'm an adult. This is a child's book. I'm getting worked up over fictional characters. I did not like that line. Moving
yeah,
on.
it's okay. I didn't like that line either, but it is
Now, what I
followed
did
with,
like,
yep,
I
you
did
go.
enjoy, and it did actually make me properly audibly laugh, is Grover putting on the, at this point, the curse isn't activated. They're just flying shoes. He
Yep.
puts on the shoes, and does well at first and then just starts going ass over tea kettle. It says, he got off the ground okay, but then fell over sideways so his backpack dragged through the grass. The winged shoes kept bucking up and down like tiny Broncos. Practice, Chiron called after him. You just need practice. Ah! And it's just Grover. The only line, it's literally all A's. It's just him screaming as he's dragged further down the hill like a possessed lawnmower heading toward the fence.
I mean, that's what got me. Like a possessed lawnmower is just, again, one of those wonderful Riordanisms that's just like, yeah, that's a good description. That's funny. That's like kids will latch onto that. That's great.
I think there's just something about, instead of Rick saying Grover yelled as he went flying sideways down, I love that he doesn't even say that Grover yelled. It's just implied by the ah.
Yes.
That's it.
And it's perfect. It
so just
good.
tickled me. That made up for Chiron being fucking brain dead.
Literally so dumb. Chiron is also holding on to an important item for this quest.
He is.
Because they almost sent Percy off without a weapon. I can't let you go without this. It's just like, not only did you say we should have trained him more, you did almost forget to give him a sword. What is with people on this quest and forgetting to give key items?
Key items. I know. It is ridiculous. It also, all right, Chiron, you shit the bed. You didn't have enough time to train Percy, but Percy was getting sword fighting lessons. Sword fighting lessons when you knew he was a son of Poseidon.
Yes, sir.
Why didn't you give him Riptide to let him practice with it sooner? I know it says that it's perfectly balanced. It feels great. But wouldn't you want him to, like, try it out in a relatively safe environment before being like, yeah, you're pretty good with the sword. Here's a totally new weapon that you've used once, and it was literally you swung it and the monster died. You didn't even really get to use it all that much. Was Chiron like, was he like Bilbo with the one ring? He's looking at it, he's like, why should I give this up? It's mine after all.
Jack, if you're waiting for me to give a defense of Chiron, I think at this point we've clearly learned that those don't exist.
What an asshole. Oh my god. But yes, Riptide is really, 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 really cool. So props to Chiron for actually giving it to Percy. I think as a kid, this was the first magic item that I thought was really sick. This is like a blueprint concept for me in terms of what I find cool in magic or fantasy items. One thing that turns into another, something innocuous turning into a weapon, that's sick. And it teleports back to your pocket. You can never lose it.
It's perfect.
It's so cool. What a good name. Riptide? That's so hard.
Riptide is, I mean, especially for a son of Poseidon, like obviously this is a Rick original. It's made for Percy in the greater scheme of things narratively. Come on, Riptide is such a nasty name.
Such
That's
a
awesome.
good title. It's so sick. Yeah, definitely super iconic. This was one where it might have been a little bit like Jingling Keys, where it's just like, ooh, Riptide's here. Ooh. I got really excited that it came around. I have no further thoughts or deeper thoughts outside of just, I got excited when I saw it. It's like, it's finally Percy's. Percy can use the sword now.
Well, rather than leaving this for the myth section, because I do have a very short set of notes, we'll call it a Riptide aside on what Riptide is all about.
I'm shaking my head right now. If we were doing this in person, you would have seen me set my book down and slowly started to shake my head when you said that. Continue,
Thank
Connor.
you. I know it was clever. So, as described here, Chiron tells us a few things. First, he says it's a gift from your father and that Chiron has kept it for years, not knowing who it was for, but the prophecy is clear to him now. That's good. That's important to know. And then he tells Percy that the sword has a long and tragic history that we need not go into, which I take as code for I, the author, would like to make this a plot point later, but I have not done that yet. But he will get around to that. And what's interesting is that when we later meet Zoe Nightshade, she gives this sword to Hercules, or Heracles, the Greek version of his name, and Heracles actually gets to use this sword to fight against Ladon, which is the dragon that guards the Garden of Hesperides. The only reason that I actually find this relevant to point out is because Luke notably failed that quest. Luke was given those shoes that Percy just passed off to Grover to go on that quest, which means that Percy quite literally has the item that Luke was given by his father, the symbol of Luke's disdain, and the item that Luke needed to succeed. The exact item, because Heracles is given this blade by Zoe Nightshade to defeat this dragon specifically, and it's said that this sword is the perfect thing that Heracles needed to win that fight. That's it. I just think that's a little bit of narrative symbolism again, kind of poetry that's happening that I thought was very interesting.
That's a great connection.
Its original form wasn't a pen. It was actually Zoe's hair clip, which is kind of neat. Zoe, by the way, is at this point in the narrative, a hunter of Artemis, but she's actually an Atlantide, which means she's a child of Atlas. So that concludes our Riptide aside.
Wonderful. Now back to the main story.
Exactly. Percy's got his really cool pen.
He's got his really cool pen that notably, new rule, where we get a new rule of the world, cannot harm mortals. Really good at killing monsters. Really good at it. And demigods. But mortals? That's not how it works. Celestial bronze is going to pass right through mortals like it's an illusion. And I love why. They simply are not important enough for the blade to kill.
That's cool. That's cool precedent for why
I
that
love
works
that.
that way.
It's a superiority complex blade. It's great.
And the line at the end of that description, you are twice as vulnerable.
Yeah.
Also just, good. I like that. I always like when we can raise the stakes just a little bit, you know?
Oh,
you as a demigod, it thinks you're important enough to kill, but so do mortals.
But also, you could get shot with a bullet.
Which would be really bad for you. Have fun.
Yeah, we've learned that, for the most part, being a demigod, being a half-blood, sucks. It's more of a curse. But, we've learned that there are actual benefits to it. Again, we talked, if it wasn't last chapter, it was a few chapters ago, about the importance of demigods and half-bloods in the mythological ecosystem, that they can walk in between realms, that they are able to take on these quests and challenge whomever they please and go wherever they want. They are these free agents of the world. They can act upon it. But that comes with a lot of these hefty prices. If you want to be an agent of the world and go and wander and challenge and spelunk and adventure, that's great. Literally everything is dangerous to you. There are no exceptions. I find that to be a really, really cool balance.
I totally agree. It's phenomenal. And then we do get another important piece of precedent that is totally just for plot reasons, which is you can't use a cell phone because cell phones are traceable by monsters.
Which I love. I actually think that's a bit clever. Not a bit clever. I think it's really clever. Super fun way to make sure that the team is unplugged. That they can't just constantly whip out a cell phone, call one another, record video, text. They have to be incredibly analog and earn means of fast travel or instant communication in terms of the iris messages. I love that mechanic. And it's something that's brought up a bit throughout the books, but after a while, it just starts feeling so natural. They don't really talk about it anymore. In a good way. No,
they just stop bringing it up because it's just, demigods don't have phones. Moving on. And it's perfect. Honestly, I can't say it better than you did. It keeps them unplugged. What more do you need? From a narrative perspective, that's everything you need.
It's also a way that Rick had really good foresight for keeping these books, at least so far, pretty timeless. Because this came out, 2005? So cell phones were common, more common than uncommon. But smartphones weren't a thing yet, really. It was just what, BlackBerry, but like what kids walking around with a BlackBerry.
Oh yeah,
So
it was way different.
reading these books now, and everybody has a supercomputer in their pocket, it makes all of that totally defunct. Demigods, they can have them. They are going to die. Like they are a point of no return, last resort, Hail Mary, you use a cell phone, the internet, whatever. And I just think, again, it does a really good job of helping these books stay topical without properly dating itself. Again, I don't like comparing these books to Harry Potter, but it's a decent analog just because of the age group that they're marketed towards and the
Yeah.
fantasy young adult elements. Reading through a Harry Potter, I know it takes place in the 90s, even though in my mind it is more atemporal. There isn't anything in those books that's strikingly 90s. It feels like you could be, Harry Potter could be a kid who is 11 years old in 2025. Maybe I'm totally out of line with that, but that's how I feel.
No, I think that's I mean, honestly, the only time where you would run into issue, we're on a real tangent now, with that
Hmm.
would be whenever he's at the Dursleys, right? Because that's when he's interacting with what in Percy Jackson would be the mortal world and there is the muggle world, right? That's where you start to interact with things like technology and you would go, that's weird. Why aren't they using cell phones?
Well, right. So that's my key point is with Harry Potter, it is a bit weird that they don't use cell phones. I guess they can use magic to be in constant communication with one another, but there's something to be said about using an iPhone to call somebody or just text somebody. It might be a little bit
Yeah.
easier than magic in some instances. So those are books where it almost feels a little weird that they don't have them. And then it, for me at least, takes me out of it a little bit in terms of, oh, it's dated. This is an old story.
Yeah, I
Old
have to
being
place
a
myself
relative
in
term.
time.
Yes. Again, this is a very minor aside, but I'm trying to give more props to Rick and Percy Jackson for very naturally phasing out this technology that could have otherwise dated it. Now, granted, there are aspects of technology in future books that absolutely date this series. I seem to remember, what is it, Heroes of Olympus? They use like a Nintendo Wii and a Wii like Fit, the gamepad for the
Yep.
Argo 2.
Yep, they use a Wii controller to control the Argo 2, and then by the time you get to the senior year adventures, like Chalice of the Gods, they just start mentioning, like, "That person had an iPhone." And if you start putting things on the timeline, you realize that Rick does not care about the actual world timeline
Yeah.
because the iPhone I mean, it would be out, but they start talking about basically technology and, like, there's a reference to TikTok in Chalice of the Gods, and it's
Well,
like,
I didn't know that.
technically, that's supposed to be taking place in, like, 2017. So
Mm.
it's like, that's not right.
You mean musically? They're on musically.
Yikes.
But anyways, tangent over. Again, props to them. I think that's a really fun concept. Another thing that we learn about that is incredibly important, and there's been some talk of it, but it's explained a little bit more blanketly, is the mist. Percy
Yep.
says, "Hey, so if I'm just walking around with a sword, people are going to notice that, right?" And Chiron says that the mist will take care of it. The mist is a very powerful thing. We learned that it is apparently based in the Iliad, or it's referenced in the Iliad several times. And the mist as a concept is whenever divine or monstrous elements mix with the mortal world, they generate mist, which obscures the vision of humans. It creates these illusions. So humans will basically fix their perception unknowingly to make something incredibly out of place seem more in place. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that a sword would look like a thing of cotton candy. It might look like a gun, whatever their brain decides to make to fill in the gap. Or if they see a monster, it might not just be, oh, well, that's a kooky little carnival character walking down the street. It might still be like a terrifying person. It just
Yeah, you
isn't.
should still be scared of that.
Yeah, you should still be worried. It'll draw attention, which I think is a fun way of allowing these fantastical things to live among the mortal world and have been actively impacting the mortal world without it just being a total throwaway of, yeah, Percy and the gang can get away with literally anything because of the mist. It's kind of a toss up, and I think that's neat.
Yeah, it's very good again for just allowing the narrative to be flexible when Rick needs it to be. Someone
Yeah.
is going to get a picture of Percy in this chapter, and it'll come up later, and Percy has Riptide drawn at the time when the photo is taken. And so they will then display this photo and be like, Percy Jackson is armed and dangerous. And it just looks like
Hmm.
he has a generic weapon. It's like, what do you mean generic weapon? I don't know, but whoever looks at the photo, the mist is going to make them just think Percy's holding something dangerous because he's holding a sword. And it's like, yeah, that makes sense. That feels good narratively. And it doesn't feel like that tension is unearned when it happens.
Exactly. Being an adventurer, being a demigod, there are no get out of jail free cards for the most part. You have
No,
to
there aren't.
think quick and on your feet and understand that you are walking between these worlds of gods and mortals, and you can't just flagrantly act like you are above immortality because you aren't. You aren't. They are still going to react to you in a way that could threaten your life or your quest. It ups the stakes in a very subtle way right here, and we'll see that further in the chapter when they're on the bus as well.
Yeah. The last little thing I'll note regarding the mist is one, I think it's a really cool part of the magic system that they'll get to expand on later. And I
Hmm.
like that it's not something that feels like they will unnaturally try to force new aspects of it, but it very gradually is like, of course, if it is all based in perception and kind of loose, that you would be able to manipulate that better if you are attuned with magic. I think that's very cool. And the
Oh
other thing
yeah.
is, for some of today's myth notes, I actually was in the Iliad, and I'm not going to talk about the mist because it's not like an actual mythological thing at all. It is just for this book. But there is a striking number of references to mist in the like one book of the Iliad that I read for today's myth notes. So it was like, huh, it's just cool. I didn't expect it to be such a big part of that. And so the fact that it was really cool to see.
Hmm.
There is one other detail before they left camp that I thought was important to bring up, which is the gods are immortal, but then so were the Titans. They still exist locked away in their various prisons, which is just setting up again our last little piece of exposition before we leave Camp Half Blood. Rick is like, hey, by the way, before you go, you also need to know this. Just hold on to this detail. The Titans are not gone. They cannot die. They're just imprisoned somewhere.
Hmm.
Sleep soundly with that knowledge. Bye.
Yeah, just this creeping dread, this malignant entity that's still in the background somewhere. Very just ominous bit of lore drop that will obviously become super important, but at this point, if you didn't read the rest of the book or you didn't know, a little weird. It's like, okay, why are we talking about this right now? I guess. Good question, Percy, but what does this matter?
Well, and that's what I was going to say is realistically, that's part of what is kind of fun about this line is it does mean literally nothing on your first read through. But on later read throughs, it's like, I'm just flagging the plot again. This
Yeah.
will be important later.
Yeah, I mean, there could be some other ways to interpret it because Percy does. There's exposited that what happened with the Titans, and there was a good Titan, Prometheus, who brought down fire to man, and that Zeus punished him, but eventually the gods warmed to humans. So there is this comparing and contrasting between the gods and the Titans. The idea of, yeah, initially the gods were doing about the same stuff that the Titans were. They
Yeah.
got better. They got better, I guess, but they're not as different as somebody like Zeus would want to have you believe. And that also means, okay, so the gods are immortal, but the Titans were also immortal. And you don't hear about the Titans anymore. They're gone, they lost. That means the gods can lose too.
Hmm.
That's the chief thing that Chiron is saying. They are immortal, but they might not be forever. And there's a bit of a distinction there that's important.
Yeah, a very important distinction. Because again, flagging the plot of the novel.
Mm-hmm.
Then they get their very typical summer camp send off by your typical centaur. And they leave Camp Half Blood, which
They
again is just
do.
another example of peak Percy Jackson, Camp Half Blood flavor, fun, getting a centaur salute as they head out. That's fun.
They get a centaur salute. They also get a big middle finger from Chiron because he says, "Relax, keep a clear head, and remember, you may be about to prevent the biggest war in human history." So unnecessary. Percy
He
knows the
is
stakes.
awful.
Percy knows the stakes. Why are you actively inflicting more stress upon this little boy? It's not necessary at all.
Very true.
But the good news is we don't have to deal with Chiron for a bit.
Yep.
So we're
Instead, we
going to
get to
leave him in
hang
the
out with
distance.
Argus.
We're going to hang out with my boy Argus. Surfer Boy, he is watching Annabeth and Percy bicker, and Annabeth explaining why they are not allowed to be friends because their parents are rivals. And that means Annabeth is not allowed to like Percy because Percy's dad made that stupid saltwater spring, and her mom made the olive tree. And also, Poseidon had a heavy air quotes girlfriend in Athena's
Yeah.
temple. Way to sanitize it.
Yep.
And Percy really doesn't give a shit, which props to him. He's just poking and prodding at Annabeth. Wow, they must really like olives. Oh, forget it. Now, if she'd invented pizza, that I'd understand. I said forget it. And I love that in the front seat, Argus, he's watching all of this. Percy recognizes. Argus didn't say anything, but one blue eye on the back of his neck winked at me. Argus recognizes what's going on. He knows that there's some chemistry here. There's some adorable, innocent little kid bickering slash crush energy.
And it is delightful.
It is. It's so nice. And again, there are more parts in this chapter that really hit home stuff that I know we've said before in prior chapters, and I will not belabor the point. But God, the book really shines when it gives some breathing room to let Percy, Annabeth, and Grover just dick around with each other
Just be
and
kids.
bicker and banter and play games and pass the time. And that is what I think, and Connor, I believe you agree, is missing from live action remakes, whether it's the movies or even the show.
Oh
It just
yeah, they
doesn't
just
give
don't have
them
time.
time to form that rapport, which is so fun to experience.
I would say it is crucial to the experience. Seriously, you hear a 12-year-old be like, "Now, if she'd invented pizza," that's that's fun. That's something a 12-year-old would say, and it's something a 12-year-old would say, and you'd go, "You're hitting the nail on the head, kid. That is a great invention."
Yeah, and also undermining this know-it-all brat who is trying to like lay down the law.
It's all just very whimsical, delightful, in a very grounded setting. Small little moments that are just too fun.
I was gonna say what's not as fun and what's not necessarily good in terms of person. Percy is thinking about Smelly Gabe and his mom. There is a flyer with his headshot on it. He tears it down, and he is very, very close to the apartment that he lived in the Upper East Side. And we learned something about Grover. Grover's an empath. He is able to sense emotions and not read minds directly, but is able to parse
Intuit.
together what somebody is thinking. Yes, based on how they're feeling. And Percy is thinking about this old apartment and how on a regular day his mom would have been home from the candy store. And then he thinks about Smelly Gabe, probably up there right now playing poker, not even missing her. I would disagree with Percy. I don't think that's true. I'm sure Gabe misses her cooking.
Yeah,
That
I was about to
seven
say he
layer
misses that
whatever dip.
seven-layer dip.
Uh-huh. But
Tragic.
Grover recognizes this and provides some very interesting insights into why the paragon Sally Jackson married the epitome of awful piece of shit human, Gabe Ugliano. And he said that Gabe is not just smelly because he is reeks of cigars and cologne and BO and onions and all that fun stuff. He is smelly in a divine sense. Or I guess maybe the exact opposite of divine. He
Yeah.
has the most human aura, the most mortal aura possible. It permeates constantly. Grover can basically smell it here, and it smothered Percy, and is probably the only reason Percy did not die to monsters or had been hunted down sooner, is because Gabe's stench clung to him and basically acted like camouflage for several years.
Yeah. And actually, this did catch my attention because I know something that you and I ripped on in, I believe, chapter 2
Mm-hmm.
is that Chiron and Grover can't smell Percy when he's standing literally right outside the door,
Yeah.
or when he goes and hides and Chiron is then sniffing for him or snuffling for him right there. I guess that could be attributed to Gabe's lingering stench.
That's true. And I had the same thought. But then it's a double edged sword, specifically for that instance, because I also considered it. But Grover says that he can smell Percy super fucking clearly. He smells superhuman, but the
Yeah,
stench is so powerful. I stand by. They should have smelled Gabe and been like, oh, well, that's Percy then.
that must be Percy. Yep.
So it still doesn't work. And I guess it could provide some rationale for why they didn't just immediately assume, oh, this is the son of Poseidon. They just couldn't tell. They literally could not tell. There was no benefit of the doubt. The stench was so potent that there was a severe lack of half blood going on. They knew he was a half blood of some kind, or at least they really thought he was. But
Mhm.
all the telltale signs in terms of like grade A number one, their stench was gone. So I will retroactively give a little bit more credit to them for not coming to the conclusion of Son of Poseidon sooner.
Quite as quick.
Everything that happens at Camp Half Blood makes it incredibly obvious, I still think. But everything before that point, if I diss them for not realizing this was a Son of Poseidon, I was incorrect, and I will credit this specific section to retroactively fixing that.
I like it. Yeah, I don't think it earns them a hall pass at all for by the time they're like, Percy was really good at boating, but nothing else. I wonder who his dad is.
And he
We'll
blew
never
up the
know.
bathroom. There was water everywhere, but Percy wasn't wet.
Is there a god of thrones, maybe? Porcelain ones?
He's a child of Zeus.
I knew it. That's what Annabeth was thinking.
That's it.
I
That's
get it
right.
now. God of
Mm-hmm.
thrones.
She's too smart for us. See, we didn't think about that until several chapters later.
But alas, Percy now has more than one daddy issue to deal with, not just Gabe.
Yes.
And I like that he's got this kind of waffling back and forth attitude as
Mm-hmm.
to how he feels toward Poseidon, because I really do think it creates something to play with for Percy where he doesn't know how he feels, not just about his dad, but about the greater demigod world when he's going, I resented Poseidon for never visiting me. He'd only claimed me because he needed a job done. And
Yep.
it also emphasizes this fine, then I'm going to take this back. I'm going to make this quest about me. And this quest is now I'm going to the underworld to save my mom because I want that and because I need that.
Yes.
And that is, one, really cool because it ties into our prophecy then of knowing that you will fail to save what matters most in the end. What matters most to him is not working for his dad. In the end, what matters most is saving his mom. And this just small little details. If we're going to have this chapter that is a little bit slower with a lot less, this is super important information, pay attention right now. It's nice to have these little details that keep moving things forward.
Oh, yeah. This is not an empty filler chapter by any means. It's definitely not. It's just in comparison to some of the prior ones we've read, it's a nice gap, bridge the gap chapter for sure.
Yep.
And
But
I do love, we talked a bit about this if it wasn't last chapter, it was the chapter before. The idea of, yes, Percy dealing with wanting his father's approval and at the very least recognition. I think that's the biggest thing, just recognition.
Yeah.
And at the same time being like, fuck your recognition. I don't need jack shit. I've been doing just fine on my own. Me and mom, we've gotten by fine without you. And now you only show up because you need something from me. Like, screw off.
From a character perspective, moments like that, as well as that kind of anxiety that he feels regarding that line of the prophecy coming up over and over again, are what also continue to make Percy seem like a genuine person, like a
Mhm.
complex person that pops off the page. It provides depth that is really important to making him feel personable and real.
Yeah, it's just so cool. That is probably outside of Luke and just his whole shtick. The idea of Percy having to grapple with the relationship or lack thereof with his father. It's my favorite aspect of this book so far. I've found it, even in the only the last few chapters that has been introduced, incredibly compelling and very
Oh,
realistic.
absolutely. But then we get to play a little bit of hacky sack with one of Grover's apples before it gets bounced up just a little too close to Grover's mouth, and he eats the whole thing, core, stem, and all, which is very fun. And then they get onto the bus, but just as they're getting on, Grover has this moment where he starts sniffing around like it's cafeteria day and he's smelling enchiladas. And I am a little curious. Why is he not sure? What is it? Percy asked. I don't know, Grover said tensely. Maybe it's nothing. But I could tell it wasn't nothing, is what Percy responds with. So is he just feeling hopeful? Is he like, please don't be a fury, please don't be a fury, please don't be a fury?
That's a really good question. It could just be that he got a blip on his radar, but he doesn't
Mhm.
know if it's a seal, like, oh, there's a seal on the radar, or if it's a military grade nuclear submarine.
How bad is this? Is this just
Yes.
some monster lurking in the New York sewers somewhere, walking down the street? Or is this about to get on the bus with us? And
Hmm.
unfortunately, it was Mrs. Dodds. The
Well, not just
same
Mrs. Dodds.
evil face. Exactly, because he scrunches down in his seat. Percy's like, please don't see me. And then two more old ladies come in. They've got green, orange, and purple hats, which are so delightful, as they looked exactly like Mrs. Dodds in wrinkled velvet dresses, triplet demon grandmothers.
Hmm.
I,
A
there's not much
terrifying
I
sight.
have to add here. This is beautiful prose.
It
I mean, it
is.
maybe beautiful's the wrong word, but it's vivid.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can imagine this incredibly clearly.
And Percy is scared, and he is right to be scared. His voice is on the verge of quivering, and quickly they're having to figure out a plan. But the good news is Annabeth is with them, and Athena always, always has a plan.
That's right. I love this brief split second interaction between them all. Percy's saying she didn't stay dead long. And he looks over at Annabeth. I thought you said they could be dispelled for a lifetime. Annabeth says, I said if you're lucky. You're obviously not. And Grover tweaking in the corners, doing the best Arnold from Magic School Bus, all three
Yes.
of them. Like, why? Seriously? We're not even out of the city yet. They're here. Annabeth is immediately in game mode. It's okay. The Furies, three worst monsters from the underworld. No problem. No problem. We'll just slip out the window. They don't open. Grover moans. A back exit? There wasn't one. Even if there had been, it wouldn't have helped. By that time, we were on Ninth Avenue and heading to the Lincoln Tunnel. There is this moment. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Inglorious Bastards before, Connor.
I have not,
Okay.
unfortunately.
It does not seem like a Connor movie. I love it. For those at home who have seen it, this scene where the Furies are just entering just abruptly onto the bus and walking down the aisle towards the back. I'm imagining it's like the scene with Hans Landa. You get jump scared by him as he walks in on this like dinner meetup where Shoshana is with the war hero. And it's just a regular Connor, for your context. This
Hmm.
regular conversation, Shoshana, Inglorious Bastards, takes place in Nazi Germany. She is a Jewish woman who escaped execution at the hands of the Nazis. She is undercover in Paris. And at one point in the movie, she is at this dinner. And it's just a regular conversation. Camera's going back and forth, over the shoulder, nothing crazy. And then you get bitch slapped by the loudest theme. It sounds like marching of boots on stone, and it just hard cuts in Hans Landa, this absolutely horrifying, smarmy, incredibly intelligent Nazi commandant is right behind her, hand on her shoulder, and it is just like blood pressure fucking spikes. It is so good, and that is what I was imagining. That energy, that sense of basically getting jump scared and imminent danger getting closer and closer and closer, and you see it coming and it came out of nowhere. I loved it. And now you're not even reaching a point where you can get off the bus. You're not only stuck in the bus, but you're about to get stuck in the Lincoln Tunnel, where it's not just you're stuck in a tunnel, it's dark and it's long. You've got nowhere to go. You are seven flavors of fucked. Such a good
Just,
set piece.
and of course, they are now having to think quickly as, again, just classic Percy Jackson humor. Mrs. Dodds got up. In a flat voice, as if she'd rehearsed it, she announced to the whole bus, "I need to use the restroom." "So do I," said the second sister. "So do I," said the third sister. And they all started coming down the aisle.
Mm-hmm.
Annabeth, at this point, she's figured out the plan. And this caught me by surprise because the most recent Percy Jackson book that I had read before this was Chalice of the Gods. And Annabeth says, "Percy, take my hat." And Percy puts on the cap of invisibility, which is only odd to me because I thought when I read Chalice of the Gods that that must have been the first time Percy put on the hat. And that felt a little odd at the time because he's having these moments where he's adjusting to it for the first time, or as if it was the first time in there. And I'm just going to jump ahead to a completely different book where he says, "I put on Annabeth's cap. Even after I adjusted it to the biggest size, it still didn't fit my head. But it seemed to do its job. I looked down at my body and saw a vague, smoky outline where Percy Jackson used to be. Suddenly, I felt like I had termites swarming all over my skin. Annabeth had never told me that the hat generated a bad case of the creepy crawlies. No wonder she only used it when she had to. Leave it to Athena to make a gift with a built-in disincentive." I pull out this quote for two reasons, and we're done jumping ahead entire books, at least for now. The first thing that I find notable out of that is, of course, that it implies that Percy has not worn this hat before, and he's like, this is a novel experience, which is just an inconsistency. It's a small plot hole when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
Chalice of the Gods, I would say, more so than it is here, because Percy ends up wearing the hat many times across the history of the first five novels. And I know for a fact he uses it to spy on Atlas and Luke at one point. He uses it to check on Nico at one point. So he wears it a couple of times throughout the first five books. The other completely disparate thought I have from that quote is it is so cool that Athena would make a gift with a built-in disincentive,
Yep.
because you and I caught this. And of course, I texted you the moment I saw this. I sent you a picture of the quote because we built in a disincentive for your gift for our D and Demigods campaign, which is just
Oh
so
yeah.
fun.
It's so cool. We were on it. We were on it. And
Well,
it
and
is
what's
interesting
crazy,
that you picked out that quote, because I read this and I also remembered you telling me that. I didn't realize that it was from the newest book though. I thought it was something that
yeah.
always been there and I just forgot about it.
No, that's from the newest book, which means that we technically came up with the idea of Athena giving out magic items with disincentives before it made it into a canon novel.
Rick, I'll take 10% of all the revenue. Check is fine, Venmo, Zelle, whatever you'd prefer, as long as I get my money.
So, with that, of course, the three old ladies are now walking down the aisle of the bus with Percy disappearing into invisibility. He manages to just scoot by Mrs. Dodds as she snips and looks straight at him, but apparently does not realize he's there. So they go back, and we get another great little detail as they are hounding Grover and Annabeth, lashing their whips. They transform from old ladies into nasty winged beasts with claws and fangs, and they hiss, "Where is it? Where? Where is it?" Because again, they're looking for the Helm of Darkness for Hades. They're not looking for Percy. They just assume that Percy stole it so that he could steal the lightning bolt.
That's a phenomenal detail that I did not pick up.
I underlined it like 6 times, made sure it was a nice big black underline. I was like, the it here in this sentence is the most important part of it. That is the operative term. They are not looking for a person. They would not call Percy an it. They would call him the boy or the pest or any other number of things that people call Percy across the series when they're a monster that doesn't like him. They would not call him it because he is more annoying than an it to them.
Yeah. Oh, Connor. Eagle eyes. Great catch.
Thank you.
Maybe
Please,
if you were on this bus, you would see what was actually going down. But the other people on the bus, they're screaming and cowering.
Confused.
They're seeing something, but it is not these fiery bat ladies with their whips.
Of course, Percy now having to jump into action. All 3 of these characters are so good-natured. Even as all of this is happening, first of all, Annabeth and Grover's first plan is, you go be safe, you're more important than us now. Which is so good-natured, heroic actions, fantastic. Annabeth draws her knife, she prepares to stand her ground. Grover doesn't have a weapon, so he grabs a tin can.
He is do it. Agent 47 hitman, grabbing his tin cans and just getting ready to whip them at the Furies' heads. This is one of the lines I underlined, is like, I adore Grover.
Absolutely.
He is terrified, but he will bludgeon their fucking skulls in with these cans.
Rather than let his friends get hurt. 100%. And you know that he would do it. Now, thankfully, for his sake, it doesn't come to that because Percy's a fucking crazy person, but here in a good way.
Well, maybe. Well,
arguably. I mean, his heart's in the right place.
He grabs the steering wheel while he's invisible from the bus driver, who is like looking back and trying to figure out what is happening in the bus, and whips the bus into the wall of the Lincoln Tunnel. And here is the bit that made me wonder, was this really a good thing? We careened out of the Lincoln Tunnel and back into the rainstorm. People and monsters tossed around the bus. Cars plowed aside like bowling pins. Connor, how many people died? How many people died in that car accident in the Lincoln Tunnel? There's nowhere for them to go. If they are getting knocked out of the way like bowling pins, they are hitting a bus head on. They are going into incoming traffic. They are getting sent into a wall or off the road if this is when they're out of the tunnel. What's the casualties here? What do you think? We aren't told. I want your guess.
My guess is 0, because later in the novel, we will see a headline that says, Percy suspected of bus incident. And it doesn't say Percy suspected of killing 3 in bus incident.
But what if the bus incident did kill 3? My thought was that it was 2 killed and 7 injured.
That's so
that
specific.
Just feels right. Yeah, like, that just feels correct to me. Don't ask me why. There's no greater meaning to it. But if I were to call my shots, I think 2 people died, 7 people are injured. Of those
I'll
7,
tell you this much.
3 are in the hospital.
All I'm going to say is that I wouldn't put it past you being correct here, but I'm going to keep being hopeful that it was 0 because that wasn't his intent. He was just trying to save his friend.
No, this was just a glimpse of that good old-fashioned psycho Percy that I had been lulled away into forgetting about and had given the benefit of the doubt too many times over these last few chapters, and now he shows his face again. That's him and his killer instinct back and hurting innocents.
Well, and honestly, it doesn't even fully save the day because the Furies get back up and they're back to getting at Grover and Annabeth to the point where Percy has to go, all right, plan. I'm going to take off the hat that makes myself invisible. That'll do it.
Oh, yeah. it's chaos. People are strewn about the
Complete.
bus. He pulls the e-brake. Everybody's trying to filter off. The Furies, they get their balance back. They're lashing their whips at Annabeth. Annabeth is waving her little knife around and swearing at them in ancient Greek. And Grover's throwing tin cans. He's the heavy artillery. The
I mean,
arm
this is
on
a
that guy.
delightful action scene as a
Oh, it's
whole.
super
Yes.
fun.
Everything about it is just, as always, it moves fast. It's not taking itself too seriously, but it's
Mhm.
not taking itself seriously either. That moment where Mrs. Dodds is looking and hesitating as she looks at Percy. Mrs. Dodds had felt Riptide's blade before. She obviously didn't like seeing it again. That's
Yeah.
a great line.
Dude,
It reminds us of like, whew, whew.
yeah. This is a legendary item. And I do
Yeah,
like the idea of it's not just celestial bronze, like Riptide hurts. Hurts bad. Like more than a regular celestial bronze sword. I love the implication of that.
yeah, that thing cuts and
An-
cuts you down.
yeah. Another great line is when all the Furies are they're hopping on top of the seats and crawling towards Percy like huge nasty lizards. And Mrs. Dodd says, "Perseus Jackson," in an accent that was definitely from somewhere farther south than Georgia, which is such a great way to put it's hell. She is speaking like a demon from hell right now.
Yes.
What a phenomenal bit of wordplay there. So good.
I have nothing to add. This is just a really fun action scene, and it ends the same way that a fair number of scenes apparently end in this book, or at least two, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. As lightning slams down on a vehicle, blowing it up, ending our chapter.
Yeah. Yeah, the quest is off to a bit of a rocky start, huh?
It is. And as they dart off into the New Jersey woods, unless you have anything to add, I suppose we'll sit here on the other side of the Lincoln Tunnel in the rain and go over some myths.
Yeah, let's open up the hood of our car and see what damage was done to it, and you can regale me
Hope we
with
don't find any
myths.
bodies.
Hopefully.
Well, we have quite a few, so we're going to go in order of roughly how I feel these things come up in the narrative. So we're going to start with Hermes' winged sandals, because Percy is given a gift from Luke, and it is these winged sneakers that he gets from, now Luke got from his dad Hermes, and now we have from Luke to Percy. And so I was curious, how do we get to the point where Hermes has this as like a staple of his kit? Where does it come from? And what does it mean? And it's honestly not that in depth as you might think. So, the earliest time that I could find that we have ever heard of Hermes sandals is from the Odyssey. So, I picked up my copy of the Odyssey and I was reading through it. And in book 5, Hermes is delivering a message to Calypso's island, and his sandals are mentioned as just being really beautiful golden sandals. That's it. They are not described as having wings at all. And the Odyssey was written sometime around the 8th or 7th century BC, is when scholars kind of estimate that too. So, no mention by the 8th or 7th century, there is no mention of winged sandals. There's just sandals, which are the primary footwear of the entire culture on a beach. So, not very notable. Then, around 600 to 550 BC, there is a poem attributed to Hesiod called Shield of Heracles. And in this poem, the sandals are first described as the winged sandals of Hermes. Now, it means that around this time is when we're starting to see it pop up. And when you look at artistic representations across time, it seems that by around the 5th century BC, that's when the wings had become a staple of Hermes' depiction from there forth. So, in the grand scheme of things, like when you consider all of what Hermes is and who he was, the winged sandals were kind of a last minute addition. Reminder that the caduceus, which we've talked about previously, might date back and find its origins as early as 3,500 BC with a Babylonian deity who carried a magic wand with two snakes coiled around it. So, this other very important part of his history goes way back. But the sandals, those come 3,000 years later. Now, Hermes also has a winged hat in some depictions. That comes from the Etruscan people and an Etruscan god called Terms. Now, Terms is a branched path of Hermes, but then when the Romans folded Hermes and Terms together into Mercury, they re-brought them back together, and the Etruscans, who put wings on Hermes' traditional brimmed hat, brought the wings in. And so that's why Mercury has the winged helmet, and not a lot of Hermes depictions actually do. Last little detail here about the sandals is they actually do have their own name. The Greeks called Hermes' winged sandals the paideia, and the Romans, who referenced it much more frequently, called them his talaria. Now you know all about Hermes' footwear.
Love it.
So, in that same scene, we also learned that the activation word for the shoes that Luke gives to Percy is Maya. Innocuous, you might think, is just a word. No, no, no. This word is the name of the mother of Hermes. So, if you think that you are Hermes and you are giving a gift to your child, and these are these shoes, and presumably Hermes chose the activation word for these winged sneakers, right? Hermes was trying to pass on motherly love to his child, sending him on this quest, knowing what his fate was, trying to give him this moment of heroism. He's trying to show him any semblance of familial connection. And it's lost on Luke. It's completely lost on him. I would honestly be surprised if Luke even knew what Maya was a reference to, just based on everything we know.
Oh,
Now,
that hurts. That hurts so
It
much. I'm
does.
grabbing my chest right now.
What do we know about Maya? We know quite a few things, but not enough that it's really worth mentioning. She's not a big player in mythology. Her biggest roles are twofold. One, she is the mother of Hermes, and two, she is the eldest of the Pleiades. We won't talk in depth about the Pleiades because we'll get to them later when we meet the aforementioned Zoe Nightshade, who is another Atlantide child of Atlas. So the Pleiades are the children of Atlas and Pleione, hence the Pleiades. Now, there are more Atlantides, which again are children of Atlas, but there are only 7 Pleiades. They are the 7 sister nymphs. They go on to become companions of Artemis and part of her hunt. And they become hunters of Artemis in the Percy Jackson lore specifically. So, in traditional mythology, we don't have a lot of descriptions about Maya outside of just the descriptions of the rest of the Pleiades. So we know specifically that she is, of course, a nymph with lovely black eyes. And that is like her one significant descriptor. We have then a little bit more information because one of her big roles is giving birth to Hermes that we still have to this day. And most of that information comes from the Homeric hymn to Hermes. Zeus snuck away in the night to secretly make love to Maya, and Maya, having fallen pregnant with Zeus's child, needs to hide. So she hides in a cave in Selene. She becomes pregnant with Hermes, and after giving birth to him, she wraps him up in a blanket, sets him down to sleep, and what happens after this, you can go listen to the myth section from chapter 6. Hermes gets up and immediately commits cattle theft. That is his first prerogative.
That's
Go
right.
up and steal Apollo's cows.
He was built for that.
He was. He literally, day one, he's like, I'm a thief. I got it. Give me those cows. And so that's what he does. The only other detail that I thought was like, oh, that's neat. Maya is the namesake for the month of May. That's it.
Huh.
So every May, we celebrate Maya, and we don't even know it. And frankly, we don't know a lot about her that's super relevant at modern time. Honestly, the biggest detail to me is just that subtle detail within universe of trying to give Luke that motherly love.
Yeah, motherly
it's
love.
So sad.
That is incredibly sad. Very sad. Now, I do know, and I have no sources for this. This is all off the top of my head from a class that I had like 5, 6 years ago. But I do remember learning about this woman, Maya. I seem to remember that she, like Hermes, was very cunning and very smart because, unlike a lot of Zeus's lovers, she didn't just stick around to like incur the wrath of Hera or Zeus because sometimes he just gets tired of the people that he's fucking and hides away. And I
Yeah.
think the reason we don't have any crazy, like, long lasting myths about her is because she lives. I think. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure she just gets away. She has
Oh,
Hermes,
yeah.
she hides and lives out the rest of her life. And it's not like, oh, yeah, but she has to live out the rest of her life in a cave. Like, nope. They kind of forget about her and she can just go on being a person, which
Yeah.
I do
No,
think
she
is
lives a
fun.
pretty peaceful life from there on out. You're absolutely correct. It's good. It's nice to hear of somebody getting a happy ending.
Yeah. And it would make sense if the trickster god came from anybody. Hopefully, it would come from somebody with enough sense and cunning to be like, I'm gonna die if I just stay here
If
after
I stick
fucking the king
around.
of the gods. So I
Yep.
gotta go chill in this cave for a little bit. And then once the gods figure out what they want to squabble about next, I'm gonna just go back to doing my thing and stay in my lane.
I have nothing to add. You have summed it up quite well. I do have a choice for you now, though, Jack.
Ooh, red pill or blue pill?
Would you like to learn about the contest of Athens next, or Athena's invisible hats?
Ooh, I tell you what, I'm gonna flip a coin. Heads is hats, tails is the competition. I couldn't think of anything clever for tails in the competition. All right, we got heads for hats.
Heads for hats, Athena's invisible hats. Why did Athena give Annabeth a cap of invisibility? What's the significance of that? We learned about Riptide and Esclumos, or however the hell you pronounce it.
I
Anaklusmos is how it's
was
pronounced.
gonna say you didn't even try.
I
I was gonna
didn't.
tell you to do it again if you didn't just do it of your own accord because that was a sad first
It
attempt.
was pathetic the first time. No. So in this chapter, Percy is given Anaklusmos. And so I was wondering if there's a juxtaposition to this. Rick creates this item that is beautifully tied to Percy's origins and the sea and all of that. So why does Annabeth get a cap of invisibility when, largely speaking, that's Hades' thing? That's like his whole big thing is he got the cap of invisibility, the helm of darkness. So I went and I looked for all of any time that a hat turns someone invisible in all of Greek mythology. And there's honestly fewer than you might think. But Athena is related to 2 of them, which is one more than anyone else. So that's neat, I guess. Athena is associated with caps of invisibility at 2 specific points. The first is in the Iliad. I mentioned I'd read a book of the Iliad for this. It's book 5. And the second is when Perseus kills Medusa. I'll start with when Perseus kills Medusa, because it's very brief. Athena is almost always associated with Perseus succeeding in his quest to kill Medusa. Surprise, surprise, Athena doesn't like Medusa. So, in many of the versions, she gives him aid in the form of weapons or advice or her shield or something. However, in some versions of the story, she also gives Perseus the cap of invisibility when he goes to slay Medusa. And it is Hades' helm of darkness. But Athena's always there. So that's our first time where Athena is associated with a hat that turns you invisible. The next time is much more clear. So by book 5 in the Iliad, Achilles is in his pouty phase, and Achilles is, of course, like the greatest warrior of the Greeks. He leads their armies, he commands everyone, and unless you are Achilles, you're going to go out into the Trojan battlefield and you're going to get your ass handed to you, especially at this point in the story because the gods have started entering the battlefield. But while Achilles is sitting out pouting, Diomedes takes charge. Now, Diomedes is, aside from Achilles, basically the next best guy. So, Athena, at this point, she's on the side of the Greeks in the Trojan War, is seeing Aphrodite and Ares and other gods head down onto the battlefield. And she's like, well, that's not fair. I'm going to go get down there too. And so she gives Diomedes the ability to see beyond mortal mists. So the quote I have from the version that you can see in the show notes, I'll link it to the Iliad that I was reading. It says, "He commands the armies and proves he is a great warrior on the field of battle. Yet more, from mortal mists I purge thy eyes and set to view the warring deities. If Venus mingle in the martial band, her shalt thou wound, so Pallas gives command." Pallas, by the way, is just an epithet of Athena in this instance. And so what this is she is saying, I will lift the mist from your eyes so that you can see who is a god and who is a man. If Aphrodite is down there, you can go kill her. Go hit her. You're not going to kill her. She's immortal. But you will be able to wound her. And so he does.
Damn.
He goes down there and he wounds Aphrodite. And at this point, Athena's like, yes, we've done it. But Athena plays by the rules. She's not on the battlefield yet. But now Mars, or Ares, is stirring up the pot. And Ares is a god of war. And he's fierce for revenge because Aphrodite's been hurt. And they go like peanut butter and jelly.
They've got those sneaky links.
Exactly.
They're boofangs.
And so she gets permission from Zeus to enter the battlefield because Zeus has actually forbade any of the gods from interfering. And Athena's like, well, clearly people are, so let me go and interfere on the side that you support. You support the Greeks, don't you? And he's like, all right, you've convinced me. Go at it. And so Athena goes down, and this time she joins Diomedes in his chariot as he heads toward Ares. And the quote that I found from, again, the copy that I've linked is, she snatched the reins, she being Athena. She snatched the reins, she lashed with all her force, and full on Mars impelled the foaming horse. But first, to hide her heavenly visage, spread black Orcus helmet o'er her radiant head. Black Orcus being an epithet for Hades in this instance. It means that before she went and charged at Ares with Diomedes, she hid herself by wearing the helm of darkness. Oh, and in case you were wondering, impelled is to drive, force, or urge someone to do something, not someone. That's Cupid's thing.
I was going to say, yeah, you're talking about the wrong one.
So in this reference, it is again specifically Hades' helm of darkness that she is using. So she never wears her own cap of invisibility. She just borrows Hades all the time. So I guess they're actually kind of tight. But after this, it reads, now rushing fierce, in equal arms appear the daring Greek, the dreadful god of war. Full at the chief above his courser's head, from Mars's arm the enormous weapon fled. Pallas opposed her hand and caused to glance far from the car the strong immortal lance. Then through the force of Tydeus' warlike son, the javelin hissed, the goddess urged it on. Where the broad cincture girt his armor round, it pierced the god, his groin received the wound. So, details here. Pallas, again, epithet of Athena. Tydeus' son, that's Diomedes. And yes, Ares got stabbed in the groin.
He stabbed him in the nuts.
Stabbed him in the nuts. So, the most important line here is the javelin hissed, the goddess urged it on. It is implied that without the strength added from Athena, Diomedes would not have been able to puncture and wound Ares. But with help from Athena, Diomedes, who's already a great warrior, has the strength to wound even a god. And so, we get both instances of Athena wearing or giving out hats of invisibility on more than one occasion. What's interesting
I
to
do
me
love that Athena, she could have helped him stab anywhere. I like the idea that it was her that's like, you got to stab this guy in the dick.
we take Ares out one way.
That's right.
Okay, you want to keep him down? Don't hit him in the chest.
You're not going to kill
hit
this
him where it
guy.
hurts.
You are not going to kill this guy. But this is going to be hilarious, and we'll take him out of the fight at the very least. You got to stab his balls.
I will point out that because of this, Ares then has a very long, winding speech about how much, oh, it's unfair. First you hurt my darling girlfriend, and then not even the god of war can fight in peace without being thwarted by some other deity. Who am I to come to blah, 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 blah. And he just complains for like genuine paragraphs, stanzas. It's a poem. And he gets like an anime level, I'm dying, but not yet.
He gets the anime bullet time as he's bleeding out from his balls.
He does.
You know what? I'll give him that simply because he got neutered. I'll give
Yeah, that's
him
valid.
his little monologue about how sad he is and how life is unfair because at the end of the day, he's still a fucking loser that got his nuts chopped off. So,
It must have hurt too, because the quote is Mars bellows with the pain, loud as the roar encountering armies yield. When shouting, millions shake the thundering field. So apparently Ares yells with literally the force of thousands of men.
I would
That's
too.
how much
That's
it's
not
hurt.
even because he's a god. I think again, it's you say that like it's surprising. He got
No,
stabbed in
it's
the
not
in the
surprising.
testicle.
He got it bad.
Yes, the
Bad,
worst
bad.
possible spot.
But what is, I think, most interesting from this set of myths is that both times that Athena is depicted in relation to hats of invisibility, it is specifically to help heroes. Perseus, very clearly a demigod, child of Zeus, and Diomedes, coming from the line of Tydeus, I believe also makes him like quarter divine or something. So he is also of divine lineage, but the big thing is she helps heroes, and she helps heroes with hats of invisibility, which is why Annabeth has a Yankees cap that turns her invisible.
Neat.
Neat indeed. Which now brings us to the tails option on your coin, the contest for the patronage of Athens. The whole big reason that we're led to believe that Poseidon and Athena don't get along. And the first detail I'll point out here is that it seems like generally, if you need an antagonist that is a god and is an important god, you just pick Poseidon because people didn't like being flooded.
I
And
was gonna
so
say
generally you would explain things as we did thing, Poseidon didn't like it, and that's why we got flooded. It's not our fault, it's his.
yeah, the seas are very temperamental. Do you know how many people died just because it got
So
stormy at
many.
sea, pulled down from the undertow?
Oh my
Poseidon
god.
is a villain. He's
Oh
terrifying.
yeah. Which is always why it's so funny to get into the Percy Jackson universe where he's just a super chill guy, and it's like that is
He got it all out of his
not the guy
system.
from the stories.
Yeah, he got it
That's
all out
what
of the
it
system.
is.
He had his fun. Now he's just more chill. He's also
You
the
could
guy that
also
made horses, and horses are terrifying.
true. You could also argue that maybe as like Western culture has changed, that's what changed Poseidon. And as people started to see the sea as like a place where you go on vacation and take a
Oh yeah,
cruise, that Poseidon's demeanor naturally changed to be more chill as well. A
yeah.
possibility.
I like that. That's fun. It's like we're gonna go on our Viking cruise. We're gonna go to the Bahamas instead of I lost all of my men to sea madness. We ran out
Yeah.
of oranges. They succumbed to scurvy. They threw themselves off the docks. There are no bodies. Thank you,
There is
Poseidon.
only the tears
Anyways,
and
here's the
memories.
textiles you wanted.
Yeah. Here's some salt. I brought it from across the
I
ocean.
really hope you enjoy this paprika.
As for the myth of the patronage of Athens, Annabeth sums it up very well. So, the most predominant version of this myth comes from Pseudo Apollodorus in a book called the Bibliotheca. And it's generally speaking, it seems like it's dated to around the 1st or 2nd century AD. So, in that hundreds range. And as a reminder of what Annabeth says, your dad created some stupid saltwater spring for his gift. My mom created the olive tree. The people saw that her gift was better, so they named the city after her. That is a very short version of this, but it is an incredibly clear, concise, and accurate summary. According to the Pseudo Apollodorus, it was very common at this time in history for the gods to come down and claim patronage of cities. So, when Athena and Poseidon came down, this place was called Attica. That was the name of the country, and it was ruled by Kekrops, a half snake person born of Earth. Don't worry about that. We'll talk about him way, way later when we get to Blood of Olympus, I think, because he shows up. All you need to know is that this half snake guy is king of what will soon become Athens. And Poseidon actually came down first. And he strikes the earth with his trident and creates a saltwater spring. which, according to some other individuals, such as Pausanias, when the south wind blew, the well gave forth a sound of waves. So it spews salt water and makes calming ASMR noises. So that's neat. And that was
Okay.
written around the 2nd century AD, so after the Pseudo-Apollodorus version of it.
Connor.
Yep.
Does a saltwater spring do anything of substance outside of provide water that can't be drank and I guess ASMR?
It looks really cool. Like, that's what I
Okay.
gotta imagine Poseidon's come down, he's like, "Look at that! I
Check
made
this
you guys
shit
a
out.
free fountain."
Yeah, I know I
Yeah.
just broke the roads that you toiled to build, but look at this cool fucking fountain.
Yeah, it sprays salt water. That's the best kind.
Great. So he was an idiot. Got it.
Yep. I mean, we can discuss this more later. There are alternate versions. So, for example, Virgil's Georgics from around 29 BC says that Poseidon instead gave the Athenians the first ever horse. But as you said, horses are scary. And that also, again, that version comes earlier than the Pseudo-Apollodorus version, but the Pseudo-Apollodorus version seems to be the more widely referenced and more widely accepted version. So if we're again considering that these were oral tradition stories that were then written down, the most popular version that was written down was probably the Pseudo-Apollodorus version. I should also briefly specify why I keep calling it the Pseudo-Apollodorus version. That's because the Bibliotheca was published under the name Apollodorus, who was definitely dead by the time it was published in that 1st or 2nd century. So it was somebody just trying to sell more books on the namesake of a famous author, quite literally. It would be like if someone today was like, "Oh my God, have you read the new book by Ernest Hemingway?" And you would be like, "I'm sorry, what?" Like,
I
did
didn't
they
realize he
find
was
it?
still
Is it like
kicking.
unpublished letters?
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's him. It's
It's him.
totally him, the
He made it.
real guy. So after Poseidon comes down, and in most versions gives them a useless saltwater spring, Athena comes down and she makes Cecrops bear witness to her gift. So she goes, "Hey, watch this." And then she plants an olive tree. And she says, "Which one do you think is more useful?" So at this point, the gods are like, "I clearly gave the better gift." Both Poseidon and Athena say this. And so Zeus says, "All right, Cecrops, you got to choose now. You're going to decide who is this city going to belong to." And there's also some like other important guys from mythology, but like Cecrops is the most important one because he's the king. And he picks Athena because of course he does. The olive tree is a far more practical gift.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the whole concise version of the myth. I do have an epilogue and an alternate version, which are both terrible. So we'll get to them. But one thing that is slightly interesting to point out here, as I mentioned, we were very briefly going to mention Argus, the guy from this chapter, because there's another myth that references a flood in this exact region, the country of Attica. But in this version, it is because Poseidon and Hera are feuding over who owns Argus, because he's like a protector guy. And yes, they are arguing over who owns him. And after Hera wins, because Argus, as we know, serves Hera,
Mm-hmm.
Poseidon sends a flood. And he's like, "Fuck you guys then. Clearly, you don't care about my cool gifts."
He throws a tantrum. That's crazy.
Yeah, he throws a tantrum and floods. So we can understand that there was presumably a flood. And I don't think I need to establish the precedent for floods being a huge thing in myths. We would be here all day. Floods happen in every major religion, mythology, whatever.
Yeah.
And so these are probably both just ways to explain floods. There was a Roman, however, who was trying to come up with a reason for what actually happened. Can we explain, like, no gods and monsters and all that? Let's take all that out of the story. Let's remove all the fun stuff. What really happened? And in this version, the Roman writer Varro, who I found his writings through a secondary source because they are summarized by the Christian theologian Augustine in the 5th century. The Roman writer Varro probably originally wrote these sometime after the Pseudo-Apollodorus came out, so sometime in the 200s AD-ish. Varro explains that this fable probably occurred, and again, this is all through Augustine, so take it all with a grain of salt. that this fable was probably occurring due to a need for an explanation for two things. One, an olive tree suddenly appearing in Attica, and two, an eruption of water somewhere else in the country. And that is like the two things that happen. And so Cecrops, who is presumably a real king, sends an emissary to the Pythia at Delphi, who we talked about last week, the Oracle of Delphi, to say, what do these two events mean? And the Oracle answers and says, well, the olive, that's a symbol of Athena, and water, that's a symbol of Poseidon. So it seems as though the gods are trying to make you pick which one of these deities you should worship. And in this version, they all voted on it, because that's what Athens does. They vote. And at this time, men and women could vote, notably different. And there was one more woman than there were men. And each woman voted for Athena, and each man voted for Poseidon. So Athena wins, and the city becomes Athens. However, the rest plays out the same. Poseidon still gets upset. He still, therefore, floods the cities. And the difference now is that to appease Poseidon's wrath, the men of Athens decide that, you know what'll make this guy happy? We should deprive women of their right to vote. So they take the women's right to vote away so that they can never wrong Poseidon again. They forbid women from having children bear their names for the future, again, to dishonor women specifically. Like, that is the entire reason it proposed in this version of the story is women, you can no longer pass along your names to your progeny because you have pissed off the gods and now you need to be punished for something you didn't do. For our voting system, for our democracy working properly, you are punished for that.
The gods hate democracy. That's
so Poseidon is happy because they get rid of those pesky suffragettes. I told you.
Oh my God. That's awesome. I love that. It's horrible, but I love that.
It is awful. So the other thing that I said was kind of awful is more awful in a funny way. There is an epilogue to this story where Poseidon, because if there's one thing we've learned throughout all of this, it's that Poseidon is a sore fucking loser.
He's a crybaby.
So there's a guy, Servius, who is a Roman mythographer, basically, and he himself is writing about Virgil's Georgics, Virgil, like the guy who wrote the Aeneid, and he recounts that Poseidon, after this all happened, was so angry over losing that he sends one of his sons, and I apologize, this is Halirrhothius, to cut down the tree. But Halirrhothius is a fucking moron. He misses the tree and quite literally hits himself in his confusion or falls on his own axe, and that kills him.
What a bumbling fucking idiot. This is great. I'm so glad we're ending with these ones. These are awesome.
So Poseidon, he's like, go, my son, avenge me, kill the tree.
He bumbles around
then
and he kills himself.
He misses the tree. He kills himself. And then Poseidon, no, it gets better. Poseidon, fucking livid, accuses Ares of murdering fell on my own axe guy.
Wait.
And so
Why?
the people of Athens
hold on.
Okay.
How did Ares get involved in this? Was he just looking for somebody to be pissed at? Or did Ares feasibly do something?
He was looking for somebody to be pissed at, and Ares, you're related to axes. That's all I found. Is that Ares is vaguely related to combat and axes, so he must have made it so that this axe swing didn't swing true.
Oh my God.
It's the whole reason.
You could blame Ares like 9 out of 10 times for most things. I love that in this one, Ares is like, the fuck did I do? Why are you bringing me into this?
And so the Athenians, eventually, they settle the matter, and they're like, yeah, Ares is innocent, duh. And as such, they end up naming the hill the Areopagus, or the Hill of Ares, to name.
So it's an even bigger fuck you to Poseidon.
Absolutely.
Oh my God. That's so petty. I adore it.
That is the story of the patronage of Athens, and that's why Athena and Poseidon don't get along, or at least one reason. We'll talk about the next one next time.
Oh my
Oh, I got
god.
one more for you. We're still
Okay.
going.
Let's go. Let's hear it.
Because we saw all three Furies. So, what better time than to talk about Furies? Now, there is a fair amount about Furies, but I'll try and keep it short because it's all pretty straightforward. Furies are described very similar to how we see them here in the book. So in the book, we are described as they have yellow fangs, bat wings, and eyes glowing like barbecue coals, long, nasty talons like gargoyles. And generally speaking, this all aligns with the depictions given across history, sans some snakes in their hair and some blood dripping from their eyes. So every version, it doesn't matter where you look, they wear black. And the places that the Furies actually appear the most is in a few myths. Specifically, we'll learn of their origins in like Hesiod's Theogony, but they're very common characters in tragedies. And so tragedians are where we have most of our sources for the Furies or the Erinyes, or later the Eumenides. So, the first thing we know is that they always wear black. That is pretty universal. The next thing that is pretty universal is that they are almost always described as having blood associated with them in some way. Now, Aeschylus is the guy who describes them as having blood dripping from their eyes, and Aeschylus is a tragedian from around 500 BC. And I just think that that's so metal, and he was an artist. He was trying to create something evocative, and he said, "Yeah, yeah, there's blood dripping from their eyes. When they're up on the stage, you got to have red makeup just pouring from them. Trust me, it's gonna look great."
It's gonna be super cool. People are gonna be talking about it in like 2,000 years.
Exactly. Now, Euripides, another Greek tragedian from a little bit later in the 450s ish, as well as Virgil and Ovid, all describe the Furies as having snakes in their hair or forehair or something to that extent. So, snakes in the hair, fairly common. It's also from these early tragedians that we get the version of their epithet. Euphemism is the word that I'm looking for. And that is the Eumenides, the gracious ones, or as we know them in this novel, the kindly ones. And that is because it was considered unwise to mention them by name for fear of attracting their attention.
Because names have power, Connor.
So I do wonder, Jack, if knowing that a Fury appears in chapter 1 of this book as a primary, like, elite bad guy that'll come and harry Percy Jackson, if Rick read that and went, "Ooh, yeah, names have power," and that's where he got it from, I would believe it.
That's a great guess. I would believe it too.
So, what do the Furies actually do? Do they actually work for Hades like they do in Percy Jackson lore? Nope. Short answer is nope. The big difference here is that Percy Jackson lore says that they oversee the fields of punishment. So you mentioned, Jack, early on that they would have been the ones that would have seen Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill over and over, or seen Tantalus ever stuck between water that he can't drink and food that he can't eat. But that's just not true. Furies were around not to punish the dead. The reason people were scared of saying their names and came up with euphemisms like the gracious ones is because they harried the living. Furies were what you had in Greek mythology to relentlessly punish mortals for all manner of crimes and sins. And in fact, it was often thought that they would do so on the complaints of other mortals. So if you were turned away and said, "Oh, my neighbor wasn't hospitable, they broke the ancient rules of hospitality," you would complain, pray to the Furies that they would come down and smite your neighbors.
It's their Eddie Brock in Spider-Man 3. God,
Well,
I come before you humble and humiliated. Please kill Peter Parker.
exactly. The Furies would then be the symbiote dripping
Yeah,
from.
from the
Yes,
mouth.
I will do what you bid.
Uh-huh.
And so they were these fearsome creatures that punished actual people in your real life. And that meant that people were thinking about them. That's probably why they ended up in all of these plays. And so it wasn't actually until around the 5th century BC that we started to see their names first appearing in literature, which is notably the exact same time that we had just seen a bunch of playwrights using these individuals as characters. So the best explanation that I could find or come up with is that what was apparently happening, or most likely was happening, was they were being referenced more and more, and you wanted to use them as characters. And so by the time of the Aeneid, in around the 2nd century, that's AD, Virgil listed them by name. Alecto, meaning endless anger, Megaera, jealous rage, and Tisiphone, vengeful destruction. And in fact, the reason that those names might be so pronounced even in modern culture where we see them appear in video games and all these sorts of things is Dante, yes, like from Dante's Inferno, uses these three in Dante's Inferno, which might also contribute to why we think they're part of the underworld and why we think they live there and work alongside Hades in Greek mythology, is because Dante runs into them in one of the circles of hell, guarding a gate. Isn't that neat?
That is neat. I'm curious, when, if you know, did they switch over from being considered these tormentors of the living to, was it Dante? That was like the first time that he was considered like for the undead, or was he building off of something prior to that?
So I believe that, and this is very much in Connor's speculation from my own time spent researching and learning about this stuff, and it appears that there is a big gap in mentioning after Christianity comes to Rome, and generally speaking, people don't believe that these actually punish mortals anymore, right? That's
Mhm.
now the duty of capital G God in the Christian mythos. So they disappear largely, but not from the culture, right? They're still in all the classical art and things. And it is Dante who will be the first person to reignite them in the written record. So unless you were performing a historical play up to that point, they are just kind of, well, yeah, they're a myth character. You can go read about them in a history book somewhere. And I do believe that that would be the turning point where they become these arbiters of the underworld. And much more
Interesting.
important to that, there is one other detail that would lead us to believe that they come from the underworld, and that would be their genealogy. Because in some versions, they are listed as children of Hades. But notably, these are some of the least renowned or well known versions. At the very least, they're not the most quote unquote mythologically accurate if you go by the understanding that oldest should be most accurate to what people actually believe. Because the oldest reference we have to the Furies and their birth comes from the Theogony, as I mentioned earlier, which Hesiod wrote presumably in the 8th or 7th century BC. So a long, long time ago. And in this version, the Furies are born when the blood of Uranus falls on the earth after he's castrated, making them children of Uranus and Gaia. Kind of. Now, this is the same version that Pseudo Apollodorus will put in his Bibliotheca in the 2nd century. However, other accounts, such as Ovid's Metamorphoses, which are from 8 AD, state that they are daughters of Nyx, children of night. The Aeneid agrees that they're children of night, and the Aeneid was written like 29 to 19 BC, so less than 50 years before Ovid, so around the same time, and agrees they are children of Nyx, but sired by Hades. It's the first mention we have of Hades, the first link to the underworld. And then even later, in around the 2nd or 3rd centuries, we have Orphic literature, which are supposedly the poems from Orpheus. And we have the Orphic hymns, which are addressed to various deities. And there's one to the Furies, an Orphic hymn to the Furies. And in there, they are listed as children of Hades and Persephone, which is really different because at that point, it means that they're actually moving later and later in the timeline. If they were
Yeah.
originally from when Uranus is castrated, that puts them at the beginning of the gods, older than all the gods.
Mm-hmm.
But as you move forward, if they're sired by Hades, that means that they're after the fall of Uranus. And if they're sired by Hades and Persephone, that's way far into the future. So it's interesting that they just kind of keep getting later and later. And notably, Percy Jackson lore can't even agree on where they come from. According to Percy Jackson's Greek gods, it goes with the version that is listed by Hesiod in the Theogony, where the Furies come from Uranus's blood dripping onto Gaia. However, In the House of Hades, Nyx claims that she is their mother, which, being in House of Hades, I, generally speaking, would accept that as more canon. So if anyone wants my 2 cents, there it is.
Huh. Very storied creatures.
Indeed. People must always be punished.
You said it, man. I'm gonna stay away from you.
But that's all of the information I have on the Furies. And that is all of the myths.
That was
For
a
episode
good,
10.
chonky myth section, Connor.
It was. We got through 5.
Damn. So you're gonna up it
6 if
next
you count
week,
the
and we're gonna
Riptide
have
aside.
6, right?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
You don't want to let
Actually,
everybody
I don't
down,
know.
Connor. You don't want to raise the bar just to lower it again, right?
Here's what I will say. In chapter 11, we're at least getting one big one, because we're talking about Medusa next week.
So that's
So
one.
if you want it, be here for it. We're going to be talking about Medusa.
I'm all for it. Connor, I'm excited. I know, I feel like I say that at the end of every episode. This was a nice bridge chapter, a good transition from Camp Half-Blood into the throes of the quest proper. But I feel like we're in it now. The preamble is, I feel like, behind us. The tutorial area is gone. Now we're in the sandbox. We get to see what everything has been set up to actually play out as.
We are just under halfway through the entire book. So we are at the point where things have got to be picking up. And I am very excited. I will say, I think chapter 10, if you're reading along, it's definitely one of the more skippable chapters. Like, go read chapter 8. Capture the Flag is way better. Go read chapter 9. Get the prophecy. But this does do a good job of moving us to the next thing, and it's fun, and it gives us some time to sit and enjoy the characters in a way that you and I have talked about seems to be missing from other iterations of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, if nothing else, it's still what Percy Jackson should be all about. It is the right vibe, the right atmosphere, and it is the right level of joy and nostalgia.
Hear, hear.
But with that, I suppose we will see you guys, or you'll hear us, next time for Chapter 11.
See ya.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to support our content, please be sure to leave a review, share with your friends, and follow us on all your favorite podcast platforms. Until next time, this has been Notes from the Oracle. Good, you have to say see ya. It's important at this point.
I didn't want to talk over you. I didn't know if you had more.
You say it at the end of every single one. Jack, it's important now.
I guess so. I didn't realize. Oh, man. Oh, well, that was fun.
To be totally honest with you, I thought this chapter was unimportant. I said as much. I think it's a skippable chapter, but the myths that are referenced, I was so excited to talk about. So I was like, oh, I'm going to keep us moving because I want to get to the stuff that I'm excited for.
Yep.
And I'm excited for these myths.
Yeah, there was a lot of them.
There was a lot of them.
That shit about the competition, that got me. Because I knew the classic story of sometimes it was a saltwater spring, sometimes it was a horse. Like, that's, I knew that. Everybody knows that.
Yep.
But I didn't realize all the shit after, which also was, you know what? Fuck women. And also, fuck everybody else. And fuck you, Ares, you piece of shit. You killed my kid. So good.
It was amazing. I was like sitting there going, I never thought that this was going to be like the big hitter for this episode, but it totally was the big hitter for this episode.
I just love it's like that one soundbite where it's like, what do you say fuck me for? I just got here. It's like,
yes. No, it was so good. And so that's absolutely why I was like, oh, we're going to move through this chapter and I am going to get to these myths because these are good myths. Clearly the best one was the contest of Athens because
It just kept getting better and better. Fuck
It
women.
does.
Also, you know what, son? Chop down that tree. And then it's like a
And then he
fucking
missed.
sitcom episode. How do you miss? It's literally a tree. It can't move.
It
It's
can't
immobile.
move. Well, and it's mythology, right? So they absolutely could have said something like an Athena was upset that they would
Intervened.
try
Or,
and,
yeah.
hit the tree and intervene. No, he quite literally just
It was
fucking
all him.
misses.
It was all
It's
him.
all its own
Which makes it
stupidity.
even better the implication that Athena, who again has a plan for everything, was probably like, nah, I don't think I even need to do anything for this one. Like, look at this
You are
idiot
going to
bumbling
fuck this up
around.
for yourself.
She might have been more like, you're gonna hurt yourself, dude. Like, you gotta stop swinging that axe around like that. Yo, Aries, you seeing
Athena
this?
Sight 2020.
It's like, what's going on here? It's like, yeah, Poseidon's kid is gonna fucking kill himself. He's like, that's awesome.
I gotta watch
I
that.
gotta check this out.
He's just standing there with his
Yeah,
popcorn.
he gets
Poseidon just goes,
screamed at.
"You did
Like,
this."
you fucking asshole! I knew you did this. He's like, I didn't. What do you mean that's what I did? The Athenians say, you know what, Ares, we feel bad for you. You want this hill? He's like, I'm sure. There's a lot happening to me right now. I'm usually the one doing things to others.
Oh God. Yeah, no, that was very, very fun. So, that was a good episode. I enjoyed that.